IAMCP, it stands for International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners. As you can see in the slide, it was established in 1994. We are there in more than 40 countries. We have got more than 80 chapters all over the world. It's the single largest network of Microsoft partners all over the world. The key here is we got partners who work together across geographies and across competencies, because it's very difficult for partners to be good in all aspects of technology. Yeah, next. So what is really our goal? Our goal in IAMCP India is that we want IAMCP to be the operating system for partnering and learning. Two key pillars. Second benefit which we believe partners can get when they join IAMCP is that you can build a great relationship with Microsoft, because you are going to have an access to Microsoft executives who come there for our meetings also. Number three, we want through our meetings to give partners access to the best technologies before they are released to the market. Our partners should have an access to them so that they become very familiar with them. The next goal is to build a phenomenal ecosystem of IAMCP members so that you can partner with each other. And slowly we want to extend this network all over the country so that we really become a pan-India organization in days to come. Yeah, next. One of the key things which we do in IAMCP is learning sessions. So let us have a look at what kind of learning sessions we have had in last few months. Next. Last month we had a session on, for example, SharePoint 2013. SharePoint 2013 is getting rolled out by Microsoft, but we already had a session for our partners. Before that, we had a session on Microsoft Exchange 2013. Then before Windows 8 was released, at least 5 months before that, we had a fantastic session on Windows 8 where partners were given a detailed view of what Windows 8 can do for them. So what you see here is that we have been consistently delivering some great learning sessions for our partners, which will enable them to become familiar with the various technologies so that when they are actually released, the partners can confidently go out to the market and engage with their customers with the same. Next. Yes, partnering and learning has been happening, but we also have one gala party every year where partners along with their spouses come for the same. So we have great food, music, games and loads of fun. Hopefully the next party which we're going to have is going to be a much bigger party, and we would like to see all of you there. Next. So how do you really become a member of IAMCP? Number one, you need to be at least a registered partner. So, or you can be a registered or a certified partner or a cloud partner. You need to pay annual fees of 5,000 rupees, and you should be ready to give at least 3 hours per month for attending the events which we have, because unless and until you come for the event, things will not work out. Now, Microsoft is omnipresent as far as technology is concerned. Most of the technology partners would be dealing with some kind of Microsoft technology. So we are very clear that if you value your business with Microsoft, you have to be a part of IAMCP. Next. So what is IAMCP? It's a platform where you build relationships. Very important. First, you invest in building relationships. After your relationships are there, partnering will happen. Because as they say, जो दिखता है वही बिकता है. So partners have reported that when they have joined IAMCP, they have actually seen a quantum jump in their business due to the partnering which they do with other partners. Come and see your business grow with us. Next. These are some of the resources which are available. We have an international website. So once you become a member, we'll give you a free access to the same. Then we have an India website also. We have a very active page on Facebook, and we are also having a group on LinkedIn. Besides this, we also have opportunity sharing space on Facebook and LinkedIn where partners can post their opportunities and then they can get a response from the partners, and accordingly partnerships can happen. Next. That was a very short introduction to IAMCP. I thank you for your time, and I do hope that next 2 hours will be extremely useful and you will go back with some key learnings on virtualization. Over to you, Deepak.
Okay, thanks, Suresh. So, hi everybody. My name is Deepak, and I work as a partner solution consultant with Microsoft. So today I'm going to give you the introduction of how Microsoft virtualization looked like. We'll go deep dive and we'll understand, how it benefits to you, and we'll also see how we can manage it using System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2012 SP1. So without any further delay, let me quickly move on. And let me quickly jump onto the agenda which we have for today's discussion. So what we're going to talk about is why we should use Hyper-V 2012, features like shared nothing live migration. We'll talk about it. We'll also talk about Hyper-V Replica, which is a newly released feature in Hyper-V 2012. We'll also talk about some of the enhancements we have made into the failover clustering and networking, and how we can manage Hyper-V using VMM 2012 SP1. So now the biggest question comes is like why somebody should go for Windows Server 2012. So apart from virtualization, what Windows Server 2012 provides is the capability to have a comprehensive cloud platform. Now everybody is talking about cloud. So the cloud is where you can have your private cloud or public cloud. It requires a platform, and the platform has to have a solid virtualization capability. So we have it here in Windows Server 2012. We also require an enterprise class scale. The scale like you can run, you can give 1 terabyte of memory to a VM. You can give almost 64 processors to a VM. Means you can provide a monster kind of a workload which you can run on top of Hyper-V based virtualization. The platform should have the ability to achieve the business continuity. So it should have the capability where if any DR kind of situations are happening, it should be resilient, and it should have the capability to take care of such situations. And those situations can occur into a small or mid-sized businesses to the enterprise. And the capability which we will discuss are available for all the customers, whether they are mid-sized customer or they are the enterprise customer. It also provides best-in-class hybrid cloud experience. So if you want to have a hybrid cloud kind of experience, you can definitely go with Windows Server 2012. It also provides you the cost saving and increased efficiency. So when we talk about cost saving, so we are talking about saving the cost of a storage. It doesn't mean that we are going to replace the SAN, but what it means is if you do not have any mission critical workload which you don't want to run on SAN, you can have some capabilities like storage spaces, and you can run your workload or capabilities on top of storage spaces. We also have the capabilities to automate the infrastructure using PowerShell, and we also have the capabilities like cluster aware updating, which also ensure that all the cluster nodes are updated as per the schedule. It also supports the modern work style. So Windows Server 2012 is the platform for virtual desktop infrastructure. So it provides the capability like, Hyper-V 2012 virtualization. It provides the latest Active Directory. It provides the capability of virtual desktop infrastructure where you can have your clients connecting to a VDI environment, and they can connect to a Windows 8 which is hosted in a data center. It also provides the capability to have direct access and latest VPN capabilities, so you can connect it from anywhere. So it serves the purpose of modern work style. Now, let me quickly, change the gear and let's just focus more towards the server virtualization. So when we talk about server virtualization, we have the capabilities like Hyper-V network virtualization, which means if you have got different customers in your environment and if you want to provide a different networking capabilities. And when I say different networking capabilities, it means that you want to ensure that one customer network should not interact with other customers' network. So we want some kind of isolation between the two networks. Where we would like to have this kind of capability, probably in our test and development environment, where we are keeping the same IP addresses for the test environment as well as for the development and production environment. So we can segregate these networks using the network virtualization, which will ensure the resources which are there in the test environment cannot interact with the resources which are in the development and production environment. The same capability can also be useful for the partners or customers who have got the hosting solution. Now the capability is available out of the box. You just need to utilize it. And if you are hosting multiple customers, you can definitely ensure that the communication between these two customers' network will never happen. We also introduced a concept called shared nothing live migration. So shared nothing live migration provides the capability to have your virtual machine live migrated over an Ethernet cable. So I would request everybody to please just mute your microphone. Okay, so shared nothing live migration, what it does is it basically provides you the capability to have your live migration, and live migration is a process where a virtual machine moves in a running state from one physical PC to another physical PC. Now with shared nothing live migration, you do not require a shared storage. So if you compare it with Windows Server 2008 R2, where live migration required a clustering infrastructure and all the VHTs had to be in a shared location. With shared nothing live migration, you do not need to worry about it. You can simply select a VM and you can move it, and the virtual machine will get moved to a different physical host. It would take its own time because all the data like the memory state, the VHT file, that all will have to travel through the Ethernet cable. So it might take some time, but yes, this capability is there. And if any SMB or if any customer who cannot afford to have clustering and shared storage solution, they can definitely go with it. We also have massive scale, which I'll show you in a minute. We also have enhancement towards the clustering. The enhancements like we can prioritize which VM should come online first and which VM should come online after that. We also have a disaster recovery solution called Hyper-V Replica. So Hyper-V Replica is a solution which allows you to replicate your information. So it's a VM information. You can select a particular VM, which will get replicated from one server to another server. Another server could be in your data center, or it could be at hoster location. And even if you do not have any trust boundaries created, means if these two physical machines are not part of same Active Directory, still we can achieve this Hyper-V replication capability. Now with Hyper-V Replica, what it does is it replicates your information in every 5 minutes, and it can update the information to the offline VM which is sitting on another physical location. We also have capabilities like hardware offloading. Now what hardware offloading does is it basically lets you utilize the latest and greatest hardware which supports ODX. Now what does ODX essentially do? ODX is a capability which lets you allow the operating system to pass on the token to the storage. Now take an example. If you are copying any information from one storage to another, what essentially happens is all the information is read into the memory of your machine, and then it copies over to the destination location. So there is an I/O involved. So input output communication happens where the information is coming to you, you are consuming it, and your processor and network is being used. What hardware offloading does is it basically gives the token to the storage system. So instead of you bring the information to me and then copy it to the different storage, I'm authorizing the other storage and I'm passing on a token. With using that token, you can directly copy the information from storage to storage. That saves a good amount of time. We also introduce a concept called virtual fiber channel. So this is a concept which lets you have the fiber channel connectivity directly to a VM. So earlier to Windows Server 2012, we didn't have this capability. Now, if you want to have a gas clustering, you want to create a gas cluster where you want your fiber channel to be connected to a VM directly, you can have it using virtual fiber channel. We also have a capability that's called as guest non-unified memory access. That's called as NUMA. So NUMA is a capability which was available in the physical infrastructure. Like any physical machine which is running or maybe which is coming with latest hardware, they generally have this NUMA capability. Now what does NUMA essentially do? NUMA, so take an example, you are running any process, and for any process, the processor and memory is communicated. So any process which is running, that's kind of loaded up into the memory, which goes to the processor and gets itself processed. Now, this whole process takes few fraction of second. Now think about lots of processes which are happening where in the physical motherboard, let's take an example, processor is in one corner and memory is in another corner. So there would be few fraction of microseconds delay which is happening in all processing. Now what does NUMA essentially do? It basically creates a topology where the memory is assigned to the closest processor. So this is the architectural change which is there. So we do not need to configure it. It's something which is part of the operating system understanding of hardware. Now what we do is with virtual machine like Hyper-V, we provide the same capability to a VM which is running on top of Windows Server 2012. So any VM which is running, they will be NUMA aware and they will also use the same topology. We can also make runtime memory configuration. So if you want to change our dynamic memory and if we want to increase it, we can definitely do it while the virtual machine is in a running state. We also introduce a concept of Hyper-V network switch. So what does network switch do? Network switch is like your switch which is created on a Hyper-V box. So when you install Hyper-V and when you want your virtual machines to communicate outside of this physical machine, at that time you create a switch, and that switch is your virtual network switch. Now virtual network switch is kind of a closed one. If you talk about Windows 2008 R2, so this switch is kind of a closed one. You can't inspect any traffic which is going through to any of the VM. Now with 2012, this is kind of open switch, and what it allows us is that we can now inspect traffic which is passing through between the VMs or from outside world to a particular VM. It also allows us to put some firewall extensions to restrict a particular traffic. It also allows some antivirus program vendors to build their antivirus to inspect any intrusion detection kind of thing. So we'll be talking about some of these capabilities in detail. Now, before we proceed, let's look at the comparison that we have from Windows 2008 R2 to 2012. Now, if you look at the right side, you will find that all the enhancements which we have made, they are like 5 times or maybe 15 times, 16 times, like that. Now, what we support is like we support 1 terabyte of memory, which can be given to a VM. What we also support is 64 virtual processors, which means you can have your workloads like Exchange, SQL, they can run perfectly fine on top of Hyper-V. We have also improved the cluster node. Earlier we used to support 16 cluster node in Windows 2008 R2. Now we support 64 node in a cluster, which means you can have a very big cluster of your virtual machines, and it can go up to 8,000 virtual machines in a single cluster. Now I will talk about shared nothing live migration. What I'll also request you is, in case at any point of time, if you have any question, you can just type in your question in Q&A panel. I may read out that questions, or probably I may answer that question later on. So now what shared nothing live migration does? So we have now the capability to have live migration with SMP. Means we can even have our virtual machines running from a local physical C drive. It can also run from a shared location. So if you want to run any VM from WAC file server, you can do that. So this was not possible in 2008 R2. It's kind of introduced in 2012 itself. So you can have a file-based storage solution, and if required, the storage is not moved, it's only moving the virtual machine. Now, what shared nothing live migration actually provides? It provides you the ability to live migrate virtual machine in a running state. Now take an example. If you have some workload running in your environment, and let's say you have got 20 of your servers. Some of those servers are very good in configuration, but you are running with some of the VMs which do not require a high CPU utilization. You want to move those VMs. The traditional way is you switch them off, you move it, you copy and paste the information, VSTs, you move it or maybe export it from that machine and import it to the other machine. Now all this process has got some downtime associated with them. A downtime could be like 20-30 minutes or maybe 1 hour or 2 hours based upon what is the actual size of that VM. Now what we have with shared nothing live migration, since these machines are not connected in terms of a shared storage, they're only connected in a LAN. Now what shared nothing live migration do? It basically lets you move the VM. Now how does this move happens? You have different options to select from. You can, if you want, you can only move the storage. You can select and move the storage. You can also move the VM state, or if you want, you can move the VM along with the storage. That's all possible. Now this migration is possible in the cluster or from outside of the cluster or between two machines which are not in the cluster. What we can also do with 2012 is we can also do the storage migration, which means if you do not want to move the VM, probably you have got enough memory and processing power available. But what you are running short with is that the storage. Or maybe now you have created a shared storage or a SAN and you want to move this VM to a SAN and you still want it to run from a particular PC or particular server. What you can do is you can simply go ahead and move the storage instead of a complete VM. So you have multiple options when it comes to a move, and when I will come to my demonstration, I'll show you how does this migration look like. Now with this, let me quickly jump into my demonstration and I'll show you how does the share nothing live migration look like. So I'm gonna share my demo machine. So this is my demo machine where I've got a couple of VMs which I'm running with, and I would like to move these VMs. So these all are running on Hyper-V 2012. That's the prerequisite, because this can only happen between two Windows 2012 servers. So you can't do it between 2008 R2 in 2012, it has to be 2012. Now, what we see in 2012 is this is the new option that's called move. I can select it. I can select next, and I have two options. I can move storage or a virtual machine completely. I'll select virtual machine, and now I'll look at the server which is available. So if I know the server name, I can type it in, or probably I can simply go ahead and select the server. And here we go. Now we can select more options, like do we just want to move the virtual machine data to a single location, or do we want to move it to a different location? So what happens if you have got multiple VHDs attached to a VM? Now take an example, you don't have much space available on any other server where you want to move this information. So what you can do is you can move some section of your VM to one server, some section to the another VM, and some section you can keep it on this particular host itself. So I don't have multiple VHDs. I'll select only and I'll say finish, and this would actually start the move. So this would take its own time. So what it also does is it also looks for whether the architecture of the storage is, whether the architecture of server is with the same processor family or not. So take an example, if you are performing this operation and if you are doing it between Intel and AMD, it will fail because you can't live migrate a virtual machine which is running in an Intel processor to an AMD processor. And it also doesn't work vice versa. So it has to be either Intel to Intel or AMD to AMD. So this has started. I'll not look into it. Maybe we'll come and look at the VM. So I'll stop the sharing and I'll go back to the presentation. And here you could see the status that this is moving the virtual machine. It's kind of 6% because it is running underneath and it's just moving all the data. So it would take its own time, and once that's done, the virtual machine will be in a live state to a different physical host. Now we'll talk about Hyper-V replica. So Hyper-V replica is a new concept that's introduced in Windows Server 2012. Now, what is the relevance of Hyper-V replica? So Hyper-V replica provides you the capability to have a disaster recovery solution. Now, take an example. If you are in a single data center, you can have a clustering and your virtual machine can move between these two physical machines or maybe between multiple virtual machines. Now, what happens if this particular site is down? What you can do is you can have a site where all the information can replicate. This is kind of your cold site or maybe your DR site or any off site where you can have this information. Now, this is an out-of-box solution, so you don't need to purchase any other capability. So it's in box replication, it provides disaster recovery, it's application agnostic, so it doesn't matter whether you have got, let's say, SQL running within the application, within the VM, or let's say Oracle running within the VM. As long as it is running on Windows Server 2012 environment, I mean to say the Hyper-V has to be Windows Server 2012, you can move those VMs. And it is also storage agnostic. So take an example, in a production environment, you have the servers, they are running on, let's say, SAN environment. And in your DR site, you don't have SAN, or maybe you are just, replicating it to the physical machine storage. You can also do that. Now, when it comes to the flexible deployment, you can have it between head office, branch office, or you could have it between your customer site to a data center. So take an example. If you do not have a DR site, what will you do? Probably you can check with your hoster who has got some VM capability, who's providing it to you. So you can keep your VMs at your hoster location. Now, in this scenario, instead of using the Kerberos protocol or Active Directory authentication, what you can do is you can use a certificate. So it can use certificate, and this replication can be authenticated using the certificate. So that is also something which you can do. Now, how does this replication work? So let's go a little bit kind of under the hood and let's understand how does this replication work. Now, typically a VM has got its VHD. Now, all the information, operating system, everything is residing into the VHD. Now, if your primary host has got VHD and if you enable the Hyper-V replication, now what it essentially do, it basically creates a log file. And this log file gets copied to the replica VM site. So when you create a replica, there is a log file which is created. Now all the information which is kind of written on VHD, at the same time it is also written on the log file. Now this log file gets replicated to the another log file just sitting at the server where you have defined your replica VM to be. Now this replica VM in an offline state, because it is the same exact copy of your primary VM. The only difference is it is the asynchronous replication. Now, what does asynchronous replication mean? It means that there is a delay between the replication. So when we say synchronous replication, it means it is happening at the same time. So Hyper-V replica provides you the asynchronous replication, which has got 5 minutes of delay, which means in every 5 minutes, the information gets replicated from your primary site to the replica site. And if any disaster happens, you would have your virtual machine, which is running at the backup site or maybe your DR site or any site where that particular offline copy of VM is kept. You just need to start it and you can start working on it. But yes, there is a delay. There is a 5 minute of delay. And if anything happens and if you have made any changes and after that disaster has struck, yes, you will lose 5 minutes worth of data. But it provides you the disaster recovery capability. Now the benefit is resiliency from failure. So if, let's take an example, your site A is connected with the site B, but it's all connected using some lease line or maybe some different mechanism. Now, if there is any problem happens and if that site is down, let's say your primary site has got connectivity which is 1 Mbps or 2 Mbps. Due to some problem, this connectivity is lost for, let's say, 2 hours or 3 hours. Now what Hyper-V replica does is it keeps a track of all the changes which has happened from the last successful synchronization, which means if any changes are not committed to the replica site, it will keep a track of it. Means if we lost a connectivity for 2 hours, now the moment we get the connectivity back, Hyper-V replica will retry and will push out all the changes which have been made from the last successful replication. So this is a built-in logic. You don't need to run it automatically. It runs, by its own. It has got a seamless handling of VM mobility, so you don't require any admin intervention. You can do the live migration of this VM. So it's not, if you're running with Hyper-V replica, you can't live migrate it. You can definitely do it. You can also live migrate the storage, or you can live migrate it, within the cluster or outside the cluster. Now what it also provides you is, it provides you the VM mobility. So you have got the primary, replica. If anything happens, it can fail over between the site. So if any problem happens with the physical machine, it can move to the cluster node. Now let's take an example. If the problem has happened between the site, what you can also do is, you can have, you can have replication which is kind of moving from one physical host to another. So if a site A has got a connectivity or physical machine failure, in that case VM can automatically move to machine 2, and from there it can connect to site B and it will replicate the information. Now for DR scenario, it gives you the capability to have the testing DR. You can test it Now, the thing is this, if you have configured the Hyper-V replica, what you will essentially do is you would also test it like over a period of time, maybe in a month or maybe in kind of a quarter, to ensure that your DR plan is working, foolproof. So Hyper-V replica provides you those capabilities. Now what it does is you can do the plan failover. So for example, you want to test out how this VM will work if it moves to the secondary location. You can also do this plan failover. So there is a zero data loss because you are planning it. All the information will get committed to the log, and you need to shut down the primary VM, and it will send the last log to the replica side. It will do the failover, and it will also establish a reverse replication. That's something which is very interesting. So if you are testing your DR location, what it will also ensure at that time that there is a reverse replication which is also established, because now you have everything at your DR location. Now, if that server happens to be down, you have at least information which is moving back to the primary site. And this is how it works. You start it, and then once you start the plan failover, it's kind of a reverse application which is established. You can also provide your network configuration on replica. So the configurations, like, take an example, you have got a different set of IP addresses to the primary site, let's say 10.22, that series. Now at your DR site, or maybe to a different site, if you are not following these IP addressing scheme, now what will happen is when the VM comes online, it will use the same 10.series IP address because this is what it knows. What you can also do is you can provide the information that if the replica VM comes online, it should have a different set of IP address. So that's something which you can do using configuration, which I'll show you in a moment. So test failover is non-destructive and it takes zero downtime. Now with this, I will get into the Hyper-V replica demo. I'll show you how does Hyper-V replica look like and how do we configure it. Now in between, if you have any questions, just please type it in. You can type it in the Q&A panel. So what I'll do is I will create a Hyper-V replica. So I'll take a machine. Let's take an example. This is my machine, which I feel is very important, and I should have a Hyper-V replica created for it. Now what I can do here is I can simply go and select enable replication. Now before I do that, what I also need to do is I need to configure this Hyper-V server to have these capabilities. Now how do we do that? We'll go to Hyper-V settings and we'll enable the live migration. That's for SNLM, which we have seen just before this demo. You need to enable it. The same way we can enable storage live migration and replication configuration. Now in replication configuration, you could see, so if you really do not want the replication capabilities on this machine, you can uncheck it. And if you want it using Kerberos, you can simply use this checkbox. If you want it using certificate, you need to provide the information of your certificate. Since I don't have the certificate, I'm getting this error message. But just for your information, you can use certificate as well in case if you want to have the communication established where you don't have a trust boundaries of Active Directory. So this is something we do as a configuration. Now what we also do is we provide the information that where should it keep its information and do we allow the replication from a specific server. Now especially in a secured environment, you might not want the Hyper-V replica enabled and it is accepting the replication from everywhere. Now what it does is it basically lets you select if you want to a certain IP address or the name of that machine can have the replication available from that machine to this machine. So you can configure it as and when you require. Once you are done with it, you will go and select a VM. So Hyper-V Replica is a VM-based application. So if you want, you can enable it for multiple VMs. It's not like you can only do it for a one VM, but you will have to enable it for a VM basis, not a host basis. So I'll select which is going to be my replica server. So I'll enable the replica with this particular server. I'll say next. It's going to verify the configuration based upon the configurations which we have set up over there. And it says the replica server is not configured to receive replication from the server. Now, if I want, I can go and configure that server, and I can tell that server to use Kerberos. So, okay. So these changes are not taking time because I have not enabled the Kerberos delegation, but that's okay. I will select other server, and I can just need to verify the machine name which I have here. Okay, so this is the 23 machines. So what I'll do is I'll use another machine. Now it has verified and it has found out that this machine is capable to have Hyper-V Replica. So since I'm not using certificate, this is grayed out. If I were using both the options, I could have selected either of one or both of them. It also lets you allow the compressing of the data. So if you want that data to be compressed while it is transferring over the LAN, you can also select that. I'll select next. If you have multiple VHTs, it will ask you to select which VHT you want to move. So you can select a particular VHT. If you want all, select them all. Now, one example why you would like to deselect a couple of VHTs. Now, take an example. You've got a VM which has got 3-4 VHTs attached to it, and some of the VHTs have got just a driver or maybe some of the ISOs. And you really don't want those informations to be, replicated over the, WAN link. So you can simply deselect them. I can also select, do I want multiple recovery points? So recovery points are like snapshot. So when it goes, it can go up to 16 snapshots. So total, you could see, I can give 0 to 15. These many number of snapshots can be created. And if I want just 2 or 3, I can select it accordingly. It'll kind of estimate how much extra space it would require if I keep on increasing the snapshot counts. Why would you use snapshot? Take an example. This replication is happening in every 5 minutes. Now, what happens if any virus attack has happened in your production environment? What you want to ensure is that the information which was replicated 2 hours prior to the virus attack, I want to use that. Or maybe 4 hours. In that way, you can have snapshots at the different intervals. What it can also do is it can replicate the incremental VSS copy. So if the if the virtual machine which is running with the application, which is VSS aware, I can also use the VSS capability in every 4 hours to replicate, just to confirm that the backup or the information which is replicated are VSS consistent. Now the other options which I can also use is that I want to replicate it just now, and I can see there is almost 15 gig of data which will transfer over the network. If it is a local network, it's good. I can start it now. I can set it to happen in the night time, or I may also copy the information to the USB drive and move it to the DR location, and then use the machine which are available at my DR location. So multiple options are available. So I can do it now. I can copy it to the media and import it there at the DR side. I can also use an existing virtual machine. Now, if I know that the operating system bits are already there, or if I've already enabled the VM, just make sure, do the consistency check, and only move the data. That's something which I can also do that. So I can click on Start, select, and Finish. This would actually establish the replication connection, and you could see here it's sending the initial replication because we have asked this VM to start the replica just now, and will first copy the information. And you could see I have the information about the replication because it's enabled. Now if I want to look at the replication, I can remove it, I can pause it, cancel the initial replication. I can also look at the view, health status. Since we have just started, I don't see much of the health status, but I can see the average size, maximum size, the latency, if there are any error occurred during the replication. I can see all those things, and I can also see when the last time it got successfully synchronized. So that's good enough information for me to know whether my replica is working fine or not. So I'll go back to my DAC because this would take its own time because it's copying like 15 gig worth of data over the network. Now I'll get into the networking. So in case if you have any questions related to shared nothing live migration or replica, please feel free to type it in here, and I would be happy to answer those questions. And if you don't have any questions, we'll directly get into the Hyper-V networking. Okay, looks like no question. Now, as I mentioned, in Hyper-V 2012, we introduced a concept of extensible switch. Now, when I say extensible switch, which means the switch can be extensible, and you can manage the switch in terms of if any intrusion is happening, if there is any firewall configurations you want to make. So this is kind of a layer 2 virtual interface. So it's not kind of a closed switch, which we had in Hyper-V 2008 R2. In Hyper-V 2012, it's a switch which can be managed. It can be programmatically managed, and if you want to build your own extensions, you can do so. And if you want to buy some extensions from the customers or from the partners, you can also do that. Now, you could see it can do the packet inspection, packet filtering, network forwarding, intrusion detection. So those sort of things you can do on a switch level. So instead of doing it on a particular VM level, you can also do it on a switch level. Now take an example. If you got, let's say, 100 of VMs which are connected, you can do these inspection on a switch level instead of going and getting into the VM level. You can do it on switch level. And these are the companies like Cisco, Nexus 1000V, Five9, NEC, Enmon. They have built, their plugins which can be, bought from these companies, and they can directly hook into the Hyper-V server. Now, when it comes to networking performance, we have the capabilities like dynamic VM queue. You can use dynamic VM queues, which can be utilized, and it reduces the CPU burden when it comes to communicating or processing any network traffic. Now, where does it help? Take an example. You've got some data which is getting transferred to a server or to a VM. Now, by default, if you talk about a traditional operating system mechanism, all the data related to network is processed using processor 0. So take an example, you've got 6 cores, or let's say you've got 12 core CPU. Now, in all the cases where we don't have VMQs kind of capabilities, the data will be processed just with the first core. It won't be utilized with the other core. Now, what dynamic Q helps you is it helps you to reduce the CPU burden, and it helps you to improve the virtual machine network traffic. We also have IPsec task offload. So IPsec related tasks can be offloaded, and again it also reduces the CPU burden. And we also have SR-IOV support. This is kind of very new in 2012. Now, what it essentially lets you do is, it basically lets you connect a NIC directly to a VM. It's more like a pass-through. So you can pass through a NIC directly to a VM, which means you will get better throughput, but at that time, you won't be able to utilize your Hyper-V virtual switch. It's kind of a direct connection you are giving to a VM. So maybe in some scenarios where you have some networking dependencies, where you want your network to be, at a very high speed, and you don't want any performance penalty in terms of going it through the Hyper-V. You want it as good as you are getting it on a physical machine, and the same way you want it on a VM. In that way, you can use SR-IOV. But there is a requirement for these features because SR-IOV is a NIC dependent feature. If you don't have this capability in your NIC, it won't work. So it has got a hardware dependency as well. If your hardware doesn't support it, operating system can't do anything with it. And this is how SR-IOV look like. So it reduces the latency, it reduces the CPU utilization, and it lets you connect a VM directly to a NIC. And we support live migration. So this is a good thing that when we provide these kind of capabilities, we are not giving any penalty in terms of other capabilities. So we support live migration when you have SR-IOV enabled virtual machines. Okay, so I'll just go back just to give you some sense. How does it work? You can see it detects whether the other virtual machines where it is migrating, whether it is live migration capable or not. If not, then it goes back into a traditional mechanism, then the SR-IOV. And this is how it looks like. You could see this is how it's using SR-IOV. When you enable it, there is a pass-through. So in the bottom, you could see it's kind of a pass-through, and then this is directly connecting to a NIC. And this is how it happens when you are doing the live migration of a VM between two SR-IOV, and you can also live migrate a VM which has got a teaming involved in the left side, or when it is live migrating that doesn't have the teaming. It is all perfectly fine. So we support these configurations. If there is team, we support it. If there is no team, still we support it. Now there are some considerations around it, like SR-IOV provides a great performance and it has got low latency, but at the same time it has got some cons that if you want some intrusion detections, you can't do it in SR-IOV because it's a pass-through. Same way, dynamic virtual machine queue has got some benefit in terms of scaling, reducing the CPU performance or CPU burden, but it has got some limitation that if you want a 10 gig kind of speed, it's better to go with SR-IOV. And this is how you enable it. So when I'll go into my demo, I'll show it to you. And you could select your DSP guard, router guard, monitor port. So take an example. You have got some users who keep on doing the testing. Now you want to ensure when a VM comes online, even if it has got the DSCP enabled, it should not be able to advertise your DSCP packets. The same way, it should not be able to, provide the router or routing capabilities. Now you can do that. You can select this checkbox. Now even if you enable the DSCP on your machine in a VM, it won't give out any IP addresses to any of the machines. Now, just going back, What we can also do with Windows 2012 is that we can also manage the bandwidth. Now, take an example. You have got multiple VMs which are connected to a single NIC or maybe a team of a NIC. Now, what you want is you want some kind of restriction that your SQL workload should get, let's say, 100 or I would say 1 gig of speed, whereas your other workload should get just 500 MB or maybe less than that. So you can provide maximum or minimum bandwidth where it ensures that you are following some SLAs. So we have got a quality of services where you can define what should be the maximum speed for this VM or what should be the minimum speed for this VM. Now, we have got some optimization towards the clustering side. So before I jump onto that, I would like to quickly show you a couple of demonstrations, and then we will take kind of 10 minutes of break, and then we'll resume with clustering, and then we'll talk about how we can manage it using VMM. So let me share my machine. Now you could see I had initialized the live migration, and if you look at my demo, the machine has already been migrated from this physical host. Now in terms of networking, what you can do is you could just simply go and look at the settings, and in settings you could see that I have got network adapters where I can select my bandwidth management. Here I could provide minimum and maximum bandwidth. So this is where I define my QoS, quality of services. I can also go with advanced features where I can enable the MAC address spoofing, DSCP guard, or router guard. Now if I want to monitor any traffic, if I have the switch capability, I can even run it in a mirror mode, and I can mirror the traffic. I can also enable the team. So if I want a NIC teaming, that's out of the box supported, and I can also enable a NIC teaming for a particular VM. I can do it on a switch level I could do it on a VM level where VM is connected with two different switch. I can use it as a NIC teaming, or I can create a NIC teaming on a physical NIC level. So that is also something which is supported and possible. Now with this, let's take a quick break. So we'll take 10 minutes of break, and then we'll resume our session. So it's 3:30 at this point of time. So we'll start at 3:40. So we'll take a quick break. Now in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to post it using Q&A panel. So I'm here only. So feel free to post your questions. I hope you guys are able to hear me properly now. Okay, so we'll get into the Hyper-V optimization on a cluster. And we'll talk about some of the enhancements which are introduced in Hyper-V 2012. Now, what we have is we had a failover clustering, and I hope everybody understands what the failover clustering is. It is you have two servers which are all connected together with the help of shared storage, and all the information is kept on shared storage. The benefit of this approach is if one physical machine happens to be down due to any power outage or any issue, what we can do is we have another machine which can take over the workload. Now, in a Hyper-V scenario, what happens, let's say, you have got multiple VMs running on a physical host. Take an example of a cluster which has got 12 nodes and it has got 400 VMs which are running. Now, if one server happens to be down, what will happen is all the information has to move to different hosts. Since VMs are kept on a shared storage, they will all move over. Now, what it will provide is that all the VMs will move over at the same time. Now, in a scenario where you have got some high priority VM, some medium priority VM, or some low priority VM, you want some kind of algorithm which can ensure that only high priority VMs should be moving very fast or should be moving fast. Now, what we do in failover clustering, we have got a start order that whenever the virtual machine gets started, so even in a scenario, if there is no live migration and cluster is starting from the scratch or from the beginning, what we have is that all the virtual machines will go with the priority. The virtual machine which has got high priority will start first. The same way, then medium priority virtual machine will come online, and then low priority VM will come online. In a case of live migration, where we have multiple nodes where the virtual machines are migrating, the high priority VM will live migrate first, and then medium priority VM and the low priority VM. Now, in a scenario where we have some kind of congestion, or maybe I would say we have got multiple physical hosts are down. At the same time, we also want to ensure that our high priority VMs are running. So cluster has an algorithm that it shuts down all the low priority VMs and then medium priority VMs to ensure that high priority VMs are up and running if there is a resource, congestion or a crunch. So that's something which has been introduced in failover clustering 2012. You can move the priority and you can select no auto start. So if you want that virtual machine should not even auto start, if there is any problem, you can even select that. You can also define who is the preferred host, and the preferred host and the owner means if this virtual machine is moving and whenever there is a chance, it should move back to the same physical machine. So that's something which we define as a preferred owner. We can also define what are the other possible owner. So in case of live migration, if I have multiple hosts, I want this VM to move only between these 3 or 4 hosts. I can also tell them, I can also tell these are the possible owner. In the case, if the VM doesn't have the possible owner or preferred owner available, it will move to any other host which is available, but it will not start. We also have something called persistent mode, and persistent mode will attempt to place VM back to the last node which it had. Now, if you have got multiple different configuration in your cluster, so let's say you've got 10 or 12 node of cluster, and 4 of the nodes are latest one, which has got high CPU and memory, and you want some of these virtual machines should be available on these node only. So you can select persistent mode. We also have the rules for anti-affinity. So now if we do not want that some of the VM should be on a same host due to any reason, maybe a reason could be some of the hosts are NLB cluster node, and you don't want that all of your NLB node or NLB VM are running on a same physical host. Now in that case, you can have the anti-affinity rule, and you can define that these 2 VM should not be on the same physical host. And if they live migrate, they will live migrate to different hosts. They won't live migrate to the same host. What we can also do with failover clustering is we can monitor the health of a VM. Now, if we want to monitor any particular service and we want that if anything happens with that particular service, we should be notified. So in that case, we can also do the VM health monitoring where we require the integration component. So by default, if you have Windows 2012 or 2008 R2 VMs running, just make sure the integration components are there. With those integration components, we can drill down and we can find out if there is any service, or I would say the selected service, if it is not working. Now, based upon the requirement, live migration can also happen. And this is how it looks like. You can select any application which has got the service available under Services console. You can define the configurable recovery actions like restart the service, reboot the VM, or move a virtual machine. We also have the capability of node drain. Now what does node drain do? It basically lets you evacuate all the VMs from a particular physical host. Now take an example. You need to take a server offline due to any reason. Maybe you're upgrading memory. Now what you can do is you can select that node and start the drain node. What will drain node do? It will evacuate all the VMs from that node and it will move it over to different physical host. And once you come back, once you have fixed up the issue or upgraded the memory, then you start the server and you come out of the drain mode, all the VMs will come back to the same physical host. It's like nothing had happened, and all the VMs which had got migrated, they will all come back to the same physical host. Now we also have the improved live migration. So if you compare it with Windows 2008 R2, where we had a live migration which could only happen just one at a time. Now with 2012, we can have concurrent live migration, and these live migrations can be queued up and will keep on happening based upon the bandwidth which they are getting. So you can have multiple live migrations which can happen. Now, apart from this, we also have some enhancements towards the unmatched scale, like failover cluster now support 64 nodes. It also supports 8,000 virtual machines. We also have a flexible VM clustering, so we can have storage with iSCSI, Fiber Channel, with SMD. So these are the storage we can support. If you are looking for highly secure cluster, we do support BitLocker drive encryption. So BitLocker drive encryption can be used on CSV LUNs. So it will ensure if you have taken out your storage and if that storage is given to anybody, nobody would be able to read the data because the data is BitLocker encrypted. We also have enhanced CSV 2.0 support, which provides a deeper integration with the storage array and for the replication and antivirus. Now with this, we are almost done with the Windows 2012 part in terms of virtualization. And let me quickly talk about the licensing, and then we'll move over to VMM part and how we can manage Hyper-V virtualization using Virtual Machine Manager. So when it comes to a Hyper-V licensing, it comes in two different editions. One is data center, another one is standard. So there is no feature difference. So unlike what we had in 2008 and 2008 R2, there is no feature difference. Clustering and all the features which we have talked about so far, they're all available in standard and data center editions. The only difference is the way they are licensed. So when you buy standard, you get a license to run two physical processors with two virtual machines. So on a physical host, if you have more than two physical machines and you want to run, let's say 3 or 4, if you want to go with standard, you'll require 2 standard license. With data center, it supports 2 physical processors per license plus unlimited virtual machines. And when I say unlimited, means 1024 virtual machines on a physical machine. Now, if you want to add more processors, so take an example, you recently bought a server which has got with 2 quad-core processor, you want to run unlimited virtual machines, it's a single license. The moment you add more processor, let's say you add 2 more processor, it becomes 4 total physical processor, you require 1 more data center license, which means 2 data center license. So this is how the licensing is configured. So I thought of sharing it with you. And in case if you guys have any question, feel free to let me know. And if you don't have any question, I will directly jump into the demonstration and I'll show you the demo around failover clustering. So I am under my failover clustering wizard, and you could see I've got my VMs which are assigned with some priority. I can simply go ahead and select these VMs, and I can change their priorities. So that's something I can select, change startup priority. If I want that it has to be high, medium, low, I can do that. And I can also search it through the console, through the UI. If I want that I need all the test VM, which is return test anywhere, I can do that. And if I go back and select a VM, I can define the preferred owner, I can define the failover mechanism, how it should get failover. I can also go ahead and put this mode into the drain mode if I want. I can select pause and drain role, which will put this physical machine into a drain mode, and it will evacuate all the virtual machines from this physical host to another available physical host. And once I'm done, I can select do not drain roles, means I'll have to go to resume and I will fail the roles back. So which means all the VMs which move from this physical machine can come back to the same machine. So these are the options I have. I can start and stop cluster service, and I can show you the VMs which are running there. I can see the dependencies, policies, and other informations around it. So that's it for cluster demonstrations. Unless until if you have any questions, I can take it up. As I'll go back and I'll talk about the VMM part, and we'll directly jump into the VMM demonstration. Okay, so Suresh has a question. If I have a dual core processor server, what is the licensing requirement? You can go with standard or data center. So there is no difference. You can go with either of one. So just to repeat, if you have data center, you get unlimited virtual machines license. Means on that physical box, you can run unlimited number of virtual machines. So maybe I would just leave it for a minute. So maybe you can have a look at the DAC, and maybe it will help you to consume and digest this DAC to understand how many licenses are required in terms of having the processor. So it is basically a VM. So again, just to repeat, it's not only the processor, because the moment you change the processor from 2 to 4, you require one more license. Doesn't matter whether it is standard or data center. The only difference is one standard license gives you 2 physical processor and 2 virtual machine. The data center license gives you 2 physical processor and unlimited virtual machine. So that's the basic difference. Apart from that, there is no difference in the feature. Now, if you have any question, please feel free to let me know. So if you guys have any questions related to what we have discussed so far, feel free to unmute yourself if you want, or maybe if you want to type in your questions, you can also do so. Okay, I was looking at somebody was typing, so I think so. Shrikant, if you have any questions, maybe you can unmute yourself, or maybe you can type in your questions. So if you have a standard edition with 20 GB RAM, so I think these are two different things. The standard edition is for the operating system, and 20 GB memory is for your virtual machines. So that's a hardware thing. Now it is up to you. You can give like 1 GB each to 20 VMs, or if you want, you can use dynamic memory and have more VMs. But it would all depend upon what kind of workload you are running within those VMs. So for example, if you're running with Exchange, so maybe let's say the Exchange minimum requirement says 4 GB is required, so you should give at least 4 gig. And based upon that, you need to plan how many VMs you can have in your environment. So I hope that answers to your question, Shrikant. If it's not the case, maybe you can unmute yourself, or maybe you can type in your questions, or maybe you can rephrase that again. Okay, cool. Okay, so there is a question, does Exchange 2013 work well under Win 2012 VM? So honestly, I have not tested or I have not, seen the Exchange prerequisite. But if Exchange supports Windows 2012 as an operating system, it will definitely work. So anything which has got a prerequisite in terms of the operating system, doesn't matter whether you install it physically or in a VM, it should work. Now there is a question, like in a physical environment, we used to use the SQL clustering. In virtual environment also you can use clustering. So you can have two levels of clustering. You can have a clustering on the VM level, and you can also have a clustering on the application level. So if any application has got any problem, so maybe on a same physical host or maybe two different physical hosts, you can have the VM clustered. That's an application level clustering. And if you want a VM level clustering, then obviously you need to have a Hyper-V server which is clustered. So you can have both. So there is nothing like you do not require it. You can have both, or you can have either of one. So the benefit of application level clustering is if the operating system is down, you have another VM which is running with the same operating system and same application. Now in the VM clustering, if the VM is down, you don't have any information. You need to restore it from the backup. So do you recommend DC on a VM? You can have it, but it's always good to have your domain controller outside of a cluster. So in any environment, you should have at least 2 domain controller. So you should have your 1 domain controller outside of clustering and 1 domain controller. If you want, you can have it on VM. So that's something which you can go with. Apart from this, if you have any questions, please keep them coming. I would appreciate if you have any questions, just type it in. Now let's talk about VMM 2012 SP1. So we talked about Hyper-V and virtualization capability. Now talk about a scenario where you have got multiple Hyper-V servers. Now instead of going and managing these individual servers, how you can manage it together using VMM. So System Center 2012 has a capability called Virtual Machine Manager, which helps you allow to consolidate all of your servers together. What it also provides is, it also helps you to carve out the networking. It also helps you to connect, have your Hyper-V servers connected to the storage. You can also create a cluster using VMM. You can also have library where you can keep all the VHTs as well as your ISO and other templates. You can also integrate with WSUS server. So if any physical host which is unpatched and you want it to be patched based upon the compliance or patch level you want to maintain, you can do that. You can also define it into a host group. So if you want to manage multiple Hyper-V boxes, now take an example. Some of the Hyper-V boxes are in Bangalore, some of them are in Mumbai, some of them are in Chennai, and you want to have some kind of logical grouping, something like what we have in Active Directory organizational unit. You can also do it by creating the host group. You can add permissions based upon the host group. So you can define that the Chennai admin should only be able to see the Chennai based servers and the Mumbai admin should only be able to see Mumbai based server. And the whole data center admin can see all of these servers, in a single console. You can also have a Pixie server where any physical machine in your environment which is deployed. And when I say physical machine, I mean to say by servers. So if you bought a server and you want to deploy an operating system on top of it, you can definitely go ahead and do that with the help of VMM 2012. So there are a lot of content around VMM 2012. So what I'll do is I'll directly jump into the demonstration and I'll show you how these components can be configured and how it helps you to manage your private cloud or data center environment. With this, I will be connecting to one of my demo machine. So what I've done here is I have installed System Center Virtual Machine Manager. So if you look at the console, I have already installed it and I have already configured it. So what we have here is we have a different views. So we have got like wonder bars which we have in Office. So whole System Center product, they have got Outlook kind of view. Now you could see on the top what are the tasks associated, based upon what view we select. So if we select VM and services, we can see all the virtual machines which you have in our environment. And if I want to look at the fabric is a concept which we call it to the physical layer, like your servers, your networking, your load balancers, your vCenter servers, your update servers, VMM servers, they all fall under the fabric. If you want to configure any storage, that is also part of the fabric. Now, I'll give you a quick view of it. First, when you install any Hyper-V box, that's the first thing you will be doing. And then you will be installing Virtual Machine Manager. Now, what VMM does is it basically lets you manage your Hyper-V environment. So you could see here, I have got multiple host scripts created. If I click on server view, I'll see all the servers, and it has got few VMware servers as well. So I'm managing the VMware Virtual Center as well. So that's a unique capability which we have, that we can manage VMware environment using, so we can't do everything, just to kind of set the expectations right. But yes, we can do day-to-day operations using PMM by communicating with vCenter. Now, if I want to drill down, you could see I've got different groups which I've created. It doesn't matter, I need to have all the servers over there. But if I have few servers, I can keep them there. Now, if I want to move them, I can simply drag and drop. If I want, I can do that as well. Now, in my Hyper-V cluster view, I can see my servers, and I can see their status, that it may have some problems. I may refresh it, and I can simply check why it's not working fine. So those kind of things I can also check it using the jobs, because all the tasks which I perform over here, it would be running some kind of job. So job is kind of a task view, which shows you the status of the task, what all it is doing, whether it was successful or failed. So if I go back to the history, it is going to process through the database to tell me what are the tasks which were successful, what were the tasks which were kind of a failed one. So I'll go back to the fabric, and I will look at the machines. You could see I've got multiple machines over here, and some of them are giving some kind of attentions, which I can have a look at to understand why it is giving that. So it's kind of a consolidated view for all of my servers, and I can have up to 1,000 servers which I can manage in VMM 2012. I can move them into the different host group. If I want, I can do that. I can simply drag and drop, and the server will get moved from one host group to another. Now that's the first task I need to do. So when I have Hyper-V servers, what I do is I simply go and add resources. I need to first select the fabric, and I need to add servers which are Hyper-V host. I can add Citrix server, I can add VMware vCenter 5.1 and ESXi 5.1, or we can manage Windows Server 2012 and 2008 R2 Hyper-V boxes. I can query it over the Active Directory. Since I've added everything, I won't be able to discover any servers. But just to give you the view, how do we add these servers? It'll ask for the run as account. So run as account is an account which has got the username and credentials which are saved within itself. Now, if I don't want to provide run as, I can type in the credential. The benefit of run as account is every time I don't need to provide those credentials. And if I want to give this capability to my junior admin, I can simply go ahead and do it. And I don't need to provide the admin password to him. He can't misuse that password because he can only utilize it to run some certain, virtual machine manager related task. I can specify the computer by typing a name, or I can create the Active Directory query, and I can simply, scan the machines. It's going to scan the machine and the environment. And once I select any of the server, I can simply go ahead and install agent on top of them. Once the agents are installed, I would be able to see them here. You could see these are the machines which it has discovered, and I already have the agents on them, so don't want to install any more agents on top of these servers. It would keep on researching because it's querying through the Active Directory, trying to find out whether that server is available or not. Now, in the right side, you could also see that if some of them are a virtual machine, it would tell that these are not the hypervisor, these are unknown. Whatever machine has got the hypervisor, you would see that would be shown up over here like this. I can simply select it, click next. I can also define whether I want to keep them into the Bangalore host group or I want to keep them into a different host group, and I can simply click next and it will get started. And so I've got the message, it's already added, so obviously I don't need to do it again. But this is the way I add Hyper-V host into the into the VMM environment. The same way, I can add my VMware vCenter server. So I already have a VMware vCenter server. So I can see it here. And it shows this is a server which is responding, managing 2 ESXi, and we are managing 3 virtual machines. If I want to add more, I can do that. Once I'm done with it, I will add the ESXi host. So I'll go and add VMware ESX host and cluster after communicating with the vCenter. So if I click here, I would select the root account, and I could see the ESXi host, which I can manage it from here. So this is how I do it. And once I have, imported everything in VMM, I can manage it from here. The second task, what I can also do from here is I can have the library server. So I have a library server which has got all the information related to my environment. So if you have got any VHT, if you've got any ISO file, now instead of installing ISO on a physical machine and keeping it on a physical machine, you can keep it on a centralized library server. Now what I can also do using library, I can create multiple profile. Now VMM is an environment which helps me to build a private cloud kind of infrastructure. Now when I say private cloud, I'm talking about a self-service. I'm talking about a capability where you don't need to provide each and every information. So what we can do here is, now we have the options to create multiple profile. Now, whenever we install any operating system, what is the task we generally do, especially towards the server operating system? What we do is we install applications. We install applications like IS server, or maybe some SQL database, or maybe some mission critical application. Now what I can do is I can templatize those applications and keep it in my library. And as and when there is a requirement, I can go ahead and deploy the VM which will have that application which is also running on top of it. Now let me give you some example. How do we do that? Now we have got some sort of profiling. Now let's get into the hardware profile first. Now whenever you create a VM, what you do is just gonna give a name to it. Let's say I'm gonna give IAMCP. Maybe I know this hardware profile has to have some, let's say, good processing power. I could say like large VM. Any meaningful name which we can understand. I can definitely give it large or small or whatever I want. And then what I can do is I can provide a cloud capability that it should go to a Hyper-V cloud or Zen Server cloud or ESX cloud. Since I'm giving it large, I should give at least 4 processor or 8 processor. Those are the things I can define. I can also define if the live migration happens between 2 different processors, they're not from a different family, that should still happen. I can give memory and let's say 12 GB. So this is how I can keep on providing the information which I generally do when I create a VM. Now what I'm doing here is I'm configuring network everything into some sort of profiling. Now every time when I create a VM and if I select IAMCP large, this configuration which I have saved, it will get applied. Now I want this should go on to the clustering. I can also say make this machine as highly available. So I'll click OK. So I've given some different range to the memory, and I have given more than 1 terabyte, which is not even supported. So I think that's my mistake. So I should give that's within the 1 terabyte limit. So I'm giving 12 gig, and it's gonna create a hardware profile. Now the same way when you give the hardware profile, what you do when the VM is installed, you configure some roles and feature. Now what I can do is I can create a guest OS profile. So let me do that, and I'm gonna give that name as. So again, I can give something related to IAMCP, and I know this is IIS based, profile. So I want my IIS workload to use it, or anything which I want, and additionally I can provide some description. I can also define this is a Windows based or a Linux based, and I can define the guest operating system. So based upon what my guest operating system is selected, I can provide further information. So for identification, I can provide the information like IAMCP. And what I also want is that I want the 010203, this way your VM name should be created. I also want my local admin password when the VM is started should be always some specific password. I also want to provide a product key, time zone, and the good thing is I can also provide roles and feature. So if I tell it as IS, what's the benefit if I don't have IS installed? So what I can do is I can see all the roles which are available in Windows Server 2012. They're all displayed over here. I can also see all the features. So I'm just kind of minimizing just to show you that all the roles are available. If I want IS, I can select it. I can go drill down and select a particular component which is relevant. I can also select a feature. So take an example. I require a .NET 3.5 or 4.5, that kind of feature. I can also do so. What I can also do is when this VM is created, it should go ahead and join to a domain. So I don't want that this VM should be just kind of available and it doesn't have the domain connectivity. Now, instead of every time I join it to domain, what I can do is I can simply define my domain name. And I can also provide a credential. So again, so I don't need to type in the credential. This credential will be used in order to join to the domain. Now, if I want to have some more advanced customization, I can also, connect an answer file. And what it will allow me to do is that it will allow me to configure few more, settings. So I can also have the answer file, which can also be, configured. Similarly, what I can also do is I can have a capability profile for my hypervisor. So by default, these capability profiles are created, but if we want any specific, we can create more. We can also create the application profile. So how do we create the application profile? Let's say, so VMM 2012 allows you to have application virtualization. So we can integrate with application virtualization, which is the server application virtualization, to virtualize any application and drop it to the server where we want to install that application. So I can provide the application configuration. I can add the application. It has to be virtual application or a SQL DAC data tier or a web application. I can simply go ahead and add it. So I can provide those packages. If I have it, I can provide it and I can simply, configure it. So just to show you that if I So here I have got my SQL data tiers just to kind of, show you that I can provide some more information about these data tiers. If I want to add any data, I can also, put the T-SQL script, which will also populate the data once the database is created. Now, the same way, I can also have my SQL Server profile. Now, if I'll browse the SQL Server profile, you'll find that I can provide my SQL Server information. So I don't have a SQL Server here, but if I have it, I can simply provide what's the instance name, what's the instance ID. So instance ID is something which is given when you sysprep a SQL. Now, if you've got SQL 2008 R2 and above, you can also sysprep your SQL Server. So that's a capability which has been introduced in SQL Server 2012. or sorry, I would say from 2008 R2 onwards. You can provide the instance, ID, product key. You can also provide the configuration, that what media source it should use, who would be the admin, what authentication do we want to use, do we want TCP IP or name pipe kind of connectivity, or if we want any kind of dependencies. So I can also do so, and if there is any service account I want to configure, I can also do that. Now the benefit of this approach is, now when I go for all these configuration, what I can do is I can create a virtual machine. Now what is a virtual machine? It's a basically a, or I would say, what's a VM template? It's basically a template which has got the configuration to create a VM. And you can give a meaningful name here. Let's take an example. I'm creating a VM template. I can define, do I want to use a existing virtual machines which is running, or maybe I can select VHT. Sorry, it's selecting the virtual machines which is currently located on a host, or use a template or a disk. So I can look at my library. I've got some VMDKs. I've got one VHTX. I can select. So I have to be very meaningful what I have given here as a name, because this is a logical mapping. I'll click next. I'll say I can provide a description. Now here you would see what I can do is I can simply go and I can select IAMCP large VM. The moment I select it, what's going to happen is it's going to look at the configuration which I have specified. And if you look at here, it's changed to 4 processor, memory is 12 gig, which we had specified. So all the configuration which we have assigned in the profile will be displayed here. When we move forward for operating system configuration, again, I have a drop-down option. I can provide my own information, but I can save my time by providing and selecting the guest OS profile. If I want to configure any application or SQL, I can also select those profiles with the same way, and I can simply hit next and create. Now what it is doing is it is creating a template. So once a template is created, I can deploy a VM. That's something which I can do. And template is created successfully. Now what VMM also provides is, it provides the capability to group your template together. Now take an example of a scenario where you have got multiple virtual machines. Now let's say you want to deploy a service. And when I say service, it's not just one virtual machine. It might be a service which is going to use one SQL server, one middle tier, or let's say a couple of front ends, maybe the IaaS web server. Now how can I ensure that this kind of service is all deployed together? Now what I can do is I can create my service template. So on top of VM template, I have the service template. I can go here and I'll create a new service template. I'll click on create new service template. Now I have options. I can have like blank, I can have single tier, 2 tier, or I could have 3 tier. Now if I want to have more tiers, I can simply go ahead and add more tiers. But I can go up to 3 tiers. Now take an example. I'm going to give a name to it as. And the benefit of this approach is that I can also upgrade the service instance. So let's take an example. I'm kind of opening it up, and you would see the name of this template is IAMCP. The version is 1. If there is any updated version, I can copy it and modify it and make it version 2. What I can do here is I can drag and drop the VM templates which I had created. So take an example, ISVM, VM, ISVM here, and let's say this is a database server. And you could see all of them are connected with a single network switch. It's using the single logical network. Now I can save and validate. This would validate if there is any configuration related issues. It's going to go and validate it. If everything is good, it would show it. Okay, so everything is looking good. So the display is coming properly. I can configure the deployment and deploy this 3-tier application. It will go and query to the physical host and will try to find out whether we have required resources available or not. Since I have selected 3-tier and I don't have 12 gig of memory available, I'll cancel it here and we'll use some small template which is kind of IS, and I'll open designer. So it is kind of a single tier instead of 3-tier. So you have the option. You can have 1 tier or 2 tier or 3 tier or 4, 5 tiers as well. And I can simply go ahead and configure the deployment. So this is a template which it is going to use. It's going to create a new VM with the name IS and then # sign means 010203 based upon number of VMs which we have created. I have the options to give the access to the private cloud which I have created, and I'll show you in a moment how does it look like. I can also give a name to it, like, and this is gonna open up one more console where I'm gonna verify the requirement. It's gonna communicate to the physical layer and it will tell me yes, everything is good, you can go ahead and deploy it. Now if I click on deploy, this is gonna deploy this service. So I'll click on deploy and this is gonna deploy this service. So it's kind of started. It will take its own time to get deployed and we can monitor the status. So this is kind of a typical use where you can use this template kind of mechanism and where you can deploy VMs or a group of VMs altogether. I'll go back to Fabric and I'll show you how I have created the private cloud. So for private cloud, I'll select VM and services. You could see how I have multiple clouds. Let me just double click on this cloud and let me show you how does this cloud look like. If I go to resources, you could see I'm utilizing all the resources. Now, if you want to create a cloud by selecting a selected resource, you can also do so. So for example, I don't want all hosts. I just want Singapore, maybe Bangalore, or maybe US. I can also do that. I can define what logical network it can connect to, what kind of load balancer it can connect to. So load balancer is a concept where, let's take an example, you want to load balance your IS workload. So you can also integrate with load balancer. So there are companies like Citrix NetScaler, F5, Brocade. They have the plugins which are available. You can install those plugins into the VMM, and you can also configure the load balancer to work with your VMs. So load balancers require the VIP template. You can also do that. You can also configure the capacity of your cloud, that if you don't want to give a complete capacity which you have, you can also restrict what is the maximum capacity they can use. So this is how we create a cloud and we can deploy a virtual machine to a cloud. So on Fabric layer, I'll go and show you the networking. So we have something called logical networks. So logical network is a concept which lets you define your networking. So let's say your Hyper-V machines are connected with network. Now you want to define that when I say DMZ, I mean every machine, every Hyper-V machine which is in DMZ should be connected with this logical network. Now how do we connect that logical thing? I'll show you in a minute. I'll just create a logical network first. Let's say your test network, or maybe my test 1, or any meaningful name. I can select allow my network site with this logical network are on same subnet or connected, or if I want network virtualization, which we talked about initially, I can also do so. I can define to which host group it should be connected, because I don't want this network to be available on all. I can do for all, or I can be a selective one. I can also associate a VLAN and IP subnet, and it is missing the VLAN subnet. That's why I'm getting the error message. Let's say VLAN is 0 and IP subnet is 15.15.15.1/32. I can give a site name as, let's say, I think that's okay. Let's see. Okay, my bad. I gave 32 subnet, which has to be 24, and it's created. The same way I've created the logical networks here, and this is how it creates it. So everything what you do that gets into the job, so you can have a view of what is happening. Now, once I create a logical network, what I do is I go to individual host and I go to properties and I map that logical network to the physical network of that particular machine. So I can go here and you could see that I have mapped it with the private network, and this is the IP pool it's using. So if I want to change it, I can do that, and my test one is also available. If I want to use it, I can do that. So it's a logical grouping which an administrator has to do before you actually create a cloud. So these are the things we need to do as an administrator. So we have talked about library, we have looked into the jobs. There are a few things we can configure here in the settings, like if you want to create a user role, run as account, and if you want to modify any password for run as account, want to create a new run as account, you can define your servicing window for VMM. You can also define the configuration providers. So right now we are only connected with the Microsoft Network Load Balancer. But if we want to connect with like NetScaler, then we need to install the provider, and we should be able to see them over here. If you want to integrate this VMM using, or if you want to integrate this VMM with the operations manager, we can also configure the operations manager setting, which I've already configured. You could see here, and these are the management packs and services which it's using. So here I could see a view of all of my VMs in my environment. So I could go to all host. So all the VMs, whether they are running on a VMware environment or on a Zen server environment, I would be able to see them all here. So you could see these are number of VMs I have. Some of them are kind of old one, which are deleted or which are kind of shut down. I can see them all here. I can kind of see a view like status, like all the running one. I want to see all the stopped one. I can do that. I also have a search option to find out if a specific VM if I'm looking for. So probably I'm kind of matched up with this list. Take an example, I've got 8,000 VMs and I'm looking for SPF. I can simply type it and it shows me all the VMs which are running with the SPF name. So and I can also look at my physical hardwares, like number of hosts I have. Here you could see I've got number of hosts, and I can see their status. Some of them are A6i, some of them are Windows Server 2012. So I can even get that information. They are whether they are 2012 or they are if they are VMware or they are Citrix or if they are 2008 R2. So I can get more information around it. If I want to see the overview, I can also do that, and I can look at more like how many servers I have, services, hosts, virtual machines, everything. I can see how much memory I have. It's 128 gig, and I'm left with this much memory. So allocated is 96, and I'm left with kind of. So I could see the memory information, the processor information, as well as the storage information. So with this, I would like to go back to my slide deck. And in case if you have any question, please feel free to let me know, because we are almost covered all the components which we wanted to touch base. If you have any specific question, I would appreciate you guys just unmute yourself, or do let me know if there is any question or any feedback you have for the session, or anything you want to discuss now. So when we talk about VMware, so VMware has got different licensing, like VMware comes in a standard, enterprise, enterprise plus. So they have got a different licensing module, and the capability which they provide, it is kind of based upon their licensing. Apart from that, VMware licensing is on per processor basis, whereas Microsoft licensing is on 2 physical processor. And so the features like shared nothing live migration, these are the one which we have, which we had started, and now it is there in vSphere 5.1. Now the benefit which we get in Microsoft approach, we get a complete System Center suite. So if you want System Center and Hyper-V, we get the capability like complete Operations Manager for the monitoring, Configuration Manager for patch management, Data Protection Manager for backup. We have VMM to manage our virtual infrastructure. We have got App Controller to manage the cloud. We've got Service Manager, which can provide complete ITL kind of process. We have Orchestrator, which does end-to-end automation. So all of these components are bundled together into a System Center suite, and you can simply go ahead and use all of these or some of them. They are a part of the single System Center license. So Hyper-V is a license which you get when you buy an operating system. So when you buy Windows 2012, you are getting Hyper-V along with it. So you're not paying anything for your hypervisor. It's part of your operating system. In order to manage Hyper-V, you would require, you can manage it. If you have a very small environment, you can manage it locally, or you can manage it using VMM. And for VMM, we require a System Center license. So we've got Hyper-V console. So if you don't want to manage it using VMM, you can manage it using Hyper-V console itself. So again, this is kind of a comparison thing. So VMware is something where you can't manage it, physically on that box. You require a vCenter or a client to manage it. Here for Hyper-V, you can go ahead and use Hyper-V console and manage it. So Hyper-V is also available with Windows 8, though it doesn't have all the functionality of server version, but it is also available. So if you are looking for some testing which you want to do, don't want to have 2 operating system or 2 physical hardware, you can also install it on Windows 8. I'll appreciate if there is any questions. You guys can unmute yourself and let me know your question. So yeah, so if you're asking questions, I would highly appreciate just keep on typing your question. And at the same time, if you could also provide some feedback about this session. So how do you rate this session? So just provide your feedback that how do you rate the session. So top 1 is excellent, then good to average. So based upon your feedback, you can select the option. And if you have any questions, feel free to post it using Q&A panel, and I would be able to answer your question.